You spoke about Nitish's morality. I do not think there is any such thing. You cannot go to the depths of his thinking. He is too wily. Look at what he did with Prashant Kishore. Shashan Babu has become a thing of scorn now. It used to be taken seriously.
Right.
But Sushashan Babu is now, when you say that, you are making fun of him. In fact, I remember he held a press conference and he said कि छोड़िए ये सब, किसी का चांस नहीं है 2019 में, किसी का और प्रधानमंत्री बनने का चांस नहीं है, मोदी ही बनेंगे. And so that was a statement of his surrender. He himself said it in a chief ministerial press conference. The faith in Modi ji, no one else, जो भी है जिंदा है तो, because of that is consistent. The excellence of Lalu's politics and how he played castes and how he played people and how he played the stage. You can't get as charismatic as Lalu Yadav. I've never seen a more charismatic man on the stage.
So what you just heard was a precursor of the themes we plan to touch upon with Sankarshan Thakur. And now let's dive into the conversation with him. On September 25th, the Election Commission of India announced the dates for the Bihar Legislative Assembly election. And polling will be in 3 phases, beginning on October 28th. And the final results will be announced on November 10th. It's going to coincide with the finals of the IPL. And what an interesting coincidence this is. So we're going to discuss all of this. And this is going to be a crucial one for the BJP. And more importantly, for the incumbent Chief Minister Nitish Kumar, who wants to be re-elected to power for the 3rd term. Now, from where I am in Mumbai, there is no way I can make sense of what is happening on the ground in Bihar and how the cast of characters make their moves unless I engage with people such as Sankarshan Thakur. And that is why a few weeks ago, I took time out to revisit his book, The Brothers Bihari. And though this book was first published in 2015, it continues to resonate and does a brilliant job of telling the story of Bihar and the 2 characters that have dominated its landscape, Lalu Yadav and Nitish Kumar. Now, I must admit that I am a huge fan of Sankarshan's writing, and I follow his work very closely. And as someone who follows, someone who who writes for a living, I can tell you something. Sankarshan writes with a great deal of depth, and what I really wish is that I could replicate the magic he infuses into writing. And that is why after I got done with reading this book, I dug up his email and wrote to him and asked if he will engage in a conversation. And he's been most gracious and has offered time. Sankarshan, thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you, Charles, for your very, very kind words. I'm not sure I'm deserving of such praise, but thank you.
Right. So we have the situation where Lalu is now in jail. Nitish is the current CM who's seeking to be re-elected. And as someone who studies entrepreneurship and leadership, I've been a business writer for all my career. I thought the story of Nitish Kumar, who's now in power, it's a particularly fascinating one. A lot of questions come up, is Nitish Kumar, is he a moral character, an immoral character? Is he likable? Is he despicable? Where does his future lie? At one point in time, he had said that he would never ally with Narendra Modi, and he is wedded to the cause of secularism. But as you have documented, he, to use a business term, he has made multiple pivots, if you will, in his journey. And what may the outcomes of the Bihar election be? Most of us don't know, but I'm sure, Sankarshan, you may have pointers to where may the answers lie. Can you help us understand the significance of the coming election in Bihar? And why does this matter in the larger scheme of Indian politics, given where we are right now?
Charles, traditionally Bihar has been important for 2 reasons. politically and electorally. Uh, One reason was that it was an influencer state in the north, especially. So what happened in Bihar would seep into patterns of voting in Uttar Pradesh and further down. So it is one of the sort of, in terms of the politics of Bihar, it used to be one of the things that influenced patterns of voting far beyond the geography of Bihar itself. The second thing was the arithmetic of Bihar. It used to, before 2000, when Bihar was divided into Bihar and what is now Jharkhand, it used to bring 54 seats to the Lok Sabha, which was only second to Uttar Pradesh. It still brings a whole lot of seats, 40 seats. And therefore, winning Bihar becomes critical to the power ambitions of whoever it is that wants to take power in New Delhi. Bihar is not an easy state to work out of the equation. And if you have Bihar, then you have a cushion. And so Bihar has been always looked upon as a battleground that various wires for power want to win. And I was not at all surprised when in 2014, Narendra Modi made such a strong pitch for Bihar. I think it's the one state where he held the largest number of rallies. He kept coming back to Bihar. He was very keen that Bihar is rested. And since 2014, Modi personally has never really lost that hold over Bihar. And that's a very significant achievement for someone who is not even a Bihari. As far as Bihar being so critical, this is what it is. You want to win Bihar. It's a key state. If you lose Bihar, it sends out a huge signal that you might not be actually as powerful as you claim to be. Because Bihar, at least from the time of the emergency or the years preceding it, 1973, 74, the cradle of the anti-emergency movement. It is where Jayaprakash began his campaign, which many people call the campaign for India's second independence, which was to defeat the emergency and the scrapping of fundamental rights, etc. And so Bihar's influence can barely be overstated in terms of how it impacts national politics, if not just in sheer numbers, but also symbolically.
This is going to be the first election since the pandemic. And do you think that is likely to have any bearing on the results, especially given how the labor migration issue has played out, and there have been huge gaps in the state public health care and education system that has been exposed?
It's very difficult to say. Very difficult to say. I mean, it's easy to reach that conclusion that
right.
Dislocated migrants, tens of thousands of them who have gone back to Bihar, who are in pretty hapless condition, a healthcare system that is, was to begin with not a very efficient system. But to say that it will necessarily influence the election is, it's not something I could only hazard a guess. Voter motivation, in my experience, often has nothing to do with how people have been governed. I'll tell you why. Bihar was extremely poorly governed 1990 on by Lalu Yadav, extremely poorly. I mean, and I speak here even as a Bihari as well. I mean, I speak as a journalist, of course, but I speak as a citizen of Bihar as well. So I might be forgiven my biases there, but the state that Bihar was reduced to between 1990 and 2005 was abysmal, and which is one of the reasons why suddenly when the smallest things began to happen under Nitish Kumar, everybody thought a miracle was happening. A length of road, 100 meters, and oh, we can have a road actually, Or simple things like what in Bihar you call rui sui, cotton wool and injections in the primary health centers, which is the most fundamental basic thing you would expect to have in a primary health center. When it began to arrive in primary health centers, injections and cotton wool, people were, oh my God, there's an injections are available in the primary health center. But the truth of this also is that Lalu was voted into power even when he had pushed Rabri Devi, who was his brazen proxy candidate, into the chief minister's chair. And so to assume that voter behavior is somehow or always dictated by governance concerns or how people see themselves as having been governed is not really true in our experience. You saw after demonetization and the entire country being pushed into long, disabling queues, I would say such an atrocity wreaked over the entire population. You saw the Bharatiya Janata Party sweep UP in a way that it never had. So I'm saying, I mean, it is very easy to reach the conclusion that migrant dislocation is somehow going to, I'm not saying it won't,
Sure,
but I'm not ready to reach that conclusion yet. And you know, a rider here, in a normal situation, I would probably have been to Bihar already a couple of times to do my initial rounds of reporting from the ground. But this is a very unusual situation. And I have not been in Bihar for a fair length of time now. And so I cannot say that I'm speaking from any real personal knowledge of the sense of the ground. Of course, I'm in touch with people in Bihar. I belong to North Bihar, to a district called Darbhanga. I have a very active engagement, almost a daily engagement with people in my village. We have a home which we maintain there. And so my conversations are with people on the ground, rural people, and a cross section of rural people are near consistent. And I speak to friends who are journalists in Patna and elsewhere in the districts of Bihar. So that quality of touch I have, but frankly speaking, I have not been onto the ground. And I would like to put this disclaimer there very firmly.
the way things are right now, it would appear that Nitish has a situation on hand, and then you have a migrant crisis, then you have a flood situation on hand as well. You know, Nitish clearly seems to have a tough situation on hand.
First of all, floods and famines don't bring down or bring governments into power. Biharis are too used to floods and famine. It happens every year. And every year you will have, relief nahi mila. You will have people screaming, crying, complaining. And it's one of those things. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not sounding cynical, but I am only trying to be realistic.
Right.
But floods, famine, and all this, all the hardship related to what happens on the ground, especially in rural Bihar, is something that people, it doesn't faze people. Not in my memory has it fazed people. And so their worldly condition as a whole, in terms of their economic condition or the human indices and the levels of lives that they live are so abysmal that it is not they don't think it's a factor. Yahi hai. Purane janam ka phal hoga. All of this nonsense happens. And then you have a slogan which catches the eye, or a particular alignment of castes that you become most loyal to, or a man that you think embodies the hope, which happened with Narendra Modi in 2014 and again in 2019. And so to that degree, floods, famines, etc. are not factors that I would really count.
When Nitish came into power, the promise of governance was there,
of some kind of good governance, after the disastrous Lalu reign. Here's a man who has his finger on the pulse of the state, and uh, that's how you described him, and who's been there in power for 2 terms, and he clearly outmaneuvered everybody else. Uh, and he made promises and he lived up to it in one way or the other. What could his narrative be the third time around?
You spoke about Nitish's morality. I do not think there is any such thing. And I remember writing an article after he, um, uh, within a year of contesting an election in alliance with Lalu Prasad and the Congress, the Mahagathbandhan, he switched over inexplicably, completely inexplicably, to the BJP. And I have tried to hazard answers even to myself on why Nitish did what he did, and I don't think I have come up with a convincing answer to myself about why he did it. But I do remember using a word. Nitish is an amoral man. He does not have a moral. He's not, probably immoral is harsh, but he's completely amoral.
Right.
I had also said of him, and I have said of this of him often, is that what you call a backbone is embedded at the back of the chair Nitish sits in.
Okay.
His morality is about power. उनकी रीढ़ की हड्डी जो है, उनकी कुर्सी में गड़ी हुई. So he is a creature of power, and I understand why he is that, because if you read the narrative, he spent so many years being nudged out of power for one reason or another.
Right.
That once he got it, he was not ready to give it up for anything. And the entire narrative, if you see in the book that concerns Nitish Kumar, the first 15, 20 years, in fact, beginning with the Bihar movement, of which Nitish, Lalu Prasad, Ram Vilas Paswan, Sushil Modi, who was the deputy chief minister of Bihar, all of these were students at that time and were part of the Chhatra Sankarshan Samiti, which is the students' agitation. They were all contemporaries. And there are various reasons why Lalu became the chosen one and not Nitish. A part of that had to do with Lalu Prasad belonging to a Dabang and a very populous, the most populous among the backward classes of Bihar, which is the Yadavs. But he forever saw himself as a man more capable of governing Bihar than Lalu Yadav was. I mean, there is this theory that once was articulated to me by Saibal Das, a man who I respect very much. He heads the Asian Development Research Institute, which is based in Patna. And I was talking to him about backward politics in Bihar, which came to the fore after Mandal, and it came to the fore in a way that it has been impossible for anyone from the upper caste becoming chief minister. And he said that, do you know the difference between Lalu Prasad and Nitish Kumar? And he explained it to me thus. He said that there is a Cockney backward and there's a vernacular backward.
Okay.
And Lalu was the Cockney backward. And Nitish was the vernacular backward. As in, even among backward, I mean, there are layers and layers even among Yadavs and all of these castes.
Right.
Once you start looking into micro layers. But Lalu came from a completely raw, rustic, from a street belligerence that would not stop at anything. Nitish comes from a more Sanskritized, if you like, background. The Kurmis of Bihar, and again, there's a meditation on Kurmis and their importance, the caste to which Nitish Kumar belongs. There is a meditation in the book on the Kurmis and what they mean and what they aspire to and what is their place in the state politics and administration, and what is the place they see for themselves. And among the backward castes of Bihar, the Kurbis are the most upwardly mobile. They are arguably the most educated. They have the most ambition to get into the services, whether it is the state level service or the national UPSC related services. They have gone into higher education. They occupy seats in universities. And Nitish comes from that background. His father was a Vaidya. He was a very soft-spoken man from Bakhtiarpur. He was a learned man. And so Nitish always thought that he, more than Lalu, has a vision for Bihar, and it will be able to take Bihar in directions that will mark Bihar out from its past. That was thwarted and frustrated for the longest time by the excellence of Lalu's politics and how he played castes and how he played people and how he played the stage. I mean, you can't get as charismatic as Lalu Yadav. I've never seen a more charismatic man on the stage. I mean, he just spells magic. One sentence, he has a gift of the gab like nobody else. And so it's very difficult to match Lalu Yadav in that department. And so for a variety of reasons, Nitish was outflanked. And then finally, he takes the plunge and then fails, falls flat on his face in his first attempt against Lalu Yadav when he splits from the Janata Dal, forms the Samta Party with George Fernandes and others, does an alliance of all people. Do you know that Nitish's first alliance in his quest for power was with the CPI-ML?
Yes.
The extreme left fringe from where he is. So he has done the whole course from extreme left to extreme right. In 2013, 14, even in the run up to 15, he went on the stage and said, I am fighting for a Sangmukt Bharat.
Okay.
I mean, this is recorded. I mean, it's a matter
Right.
of fact, not sort of backroom gossip or anything.
Right.
But look at where he is. So I'm saying that Nitish, once he got power, he was not willing to give it up, come what may.
Right.
He did give it up in a very frustrated phase when he got completely decimated in 2014.
Uh-huh.
And I think in a fit of depression and in a fit of reclusiveness. And he does have a tendency to become recluse, and he uses his tendency to become reclusive also as an instrument of politics. As in, he will go into a shell and nobody will know what's happening. He'll stop talking even to the closest advisors. And that's the phase where he gave the seat, appointed Jitan Ram Manjhi,
Right.
and said, and he used to speak of sannyas at that time and all sorts of mumbo jumbo, which later came out, of course, not to be true. It was a temporary retreat from power politics while he was mulling his next move. And so he is in terms of politics and the games he can play, he's as cunning as they come. And he has also proved in later years to be as abiding
Right.
and loyal to the instruments and purposes of power as anybody. His Gita is power. Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed. He will try any trick in the book, and that is also part of this narrative.
Right.
You see, Nitish Kumar is not averse to any trick or tactic that will keep him in power. That is the truth of the man.
Right.
And I really, as a politician, I have no quarrel with it. I might write against it. But what does a politician do? His quest is the quest for power. Now, what do you do with that power is a separate thing. Nitish Kumar between 2005 and 2010 did some good things with the power he had got. And he marked a departure from what was happening in the Lalu Yadav years. And it was incredulous to the people of Bihar that something was being done. That when I refer to this anecdote in the book, that Nitish Kumar, when he held his first press conference as chief minister in 2005, the big gathering of Patna journalists, one of them asked him, "Ki, aapki priority kya hogi?" And he said, "We will re-establish the rule of law. हम कानून का राज वापस लाएंगे." And you know what happened? The entire gathering laughed, guffawed. What sort of bakwas is he doing? How can anyone have such an ambition that he will restore rule of? Such was the level that Bihar had been reduced to. This is in the Lalu Yadav years. Let us not forget about it. Let us not be confused on the darkness of the Lalu Yadav years on Bihar. Right. A lot of people say, "Oh, he was secular and this and that." The point is, you can do all of that and still work. You cannot have secularism as your anointed principle and then do whatever you wish to do or not do. Right. And so the level of expectation among Biharis itself had dipped so low that, I often say that Biharis were feeling so low they had to reach up to tie their shoelaces. It was so low. But he did bring back a semblance of law and order. He did bring back a semblance of governance. He did bring back public works. Roads were built. Primary health centers were supplied. Schools were painted. Girls were given bicycles and uniforms. And all of that happened. And all of that paid him huge dividends in 2010. Almost came back elected on his own. And then, of course, we know what happened in 2013. He was so upset with Modi's anointment as the prime ministerial candidate of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He thought it a threat. I was at the press conference in Patna where he decided to leave the alliance, and he said, "Ye Modi ki tajposhi hui hai, and we don't want this man as prime minister because he poses a threat to the idea of India." That is the phrase which was very fashionable with him those days. The other phrase that was fashionable with him was inclusive development. And he wanted to keep Bihar deeply secular and all of that. So he did make that break, and it was a very clean break that he made, and he made articulated things, his opposition to Modi several times and very deeply. Personally, to me, while I was writing the book and was interviewing him, these conversations would take place over months and months and months. So some of those conversations happened together over a period of days, and then there were breaks because he was busy, I was busy. And so, but there was a consistency in him about the kind of Bihar and the kind of India he wanted to see. And suddenly in 2015, he completely ditched that idea and did something. What is one to do?
Right.
What is one to do? He did not even need to do that in order to stay in power. But I think after he saw the UP result, it suddenly dropped on him that there is no space for him at the center. And there is no chance of him becoming prime minister. He did have that ambition. And there's nothing wrong in having that ambition for any politician, provided you can match it on the ground with your strength. But he dropped all of it. But I don't know why he dropped the alliance. I still don't know. I can only hazard all sorts of guesses, but I still don't know why he ditched that alliance. What was the great hurry? What was the compulsion? Right. And the way he did it was very unseemly.
One of the impressions I had, I was left with, was that perhaps Nitish is while he has his motivations to stay in power after the dark years of Lalu, this man may perhaps be a better alternative to Bihar than what Lalu may have been. That was the impression I was left with.
No,
Of
you're
course.
quite right. You're quite right. Let me interrupt you here. You're
Okay.
quite right. And I was of the same opinion, because Bihar needed severely, acutely, Bihar needed correction.
Right.
And when Nitish came to power in 2005, he effected correction.
Right.
He is a man, still, I would say, even today, he is still a man who understands government files.
Right.
He understands how decision moves. He understands what direction to give to the bureaucracy. He can sit and convene and stay with patience in a council of ministers meeting. He understands the workings of it. Lalu was completely a mass leader, stage man, couldn't be bothered about governance, this, that. He was, rash with his decisions. He was raffish with the bureaucracy. He undermined them. Nitish, because he comes from what should I say? The word a more considered mind. He's able to deliberate on what is good, what is not. How do we improve this? How do we take this forward? And all of that he can put his mind to. Nitish lacks the qualities of a mass leader, which is why I said, I almost, as a Bihari, I almost lament the fact that how good would it have been if Lalu did the mass politics and Nitish left Nitish to do the governance. But the two men never had the kind of confidence which, some of us expected them to have. Bihar would have been in a much more different place if that tandem had been able to work in that way. But you can't become other people, and you can only hope some things. You can only have hope of others. You cannot become inhabit them and become influential in ways that they don't want to be. Nitish Kumar knows how to do this.
Right.
But he has, over the last 5-7 years, staying in power has become such a huge motivation that governance has been given short shrift, I would say. I mean, again, the second term of Nitish Kumar is a vast contrast to his first term. Sushashan Babu has become a thing of scorn now. It used to be taken seriously.
Right.
But Sushashan Babu is now, I mean, when you say that, you're making fun of him. He's no longer that man.
No longer the man that was wedded to development. Is that what you're saying?
He is wedded to power.
He's wedded to power.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think you could illustrate
and there's nothing wrong in being wedded to power, as I said.
Which is the political motive in any case, right?
Yeah, I mean, fine. It is with political power that you're able to do things. It is what you do with that power.
Right.
I do not at all think ambition in a politician is a bad thing. I have never knocked it.
Right.
What does a politician do? He's not going into a teaching class or anything. He's not going to sit and write essays or go into. Politicians work with power, but their test is, what do they do with that power?
Has he dropped the ball? The point that you made earlier, has he dropped the ball on the prime ministerial ambition? Did he drop the ball somewhere for some inexplicable reason? I mean,
I think he did. I think he immediately after the UP election, in fact I remember he held a press conference and he said कि छोड़िए ये सब, किसी का चांस नहीं है 2019 में, किसी का और प्रधानमंत्री बनने का चांस नहीं है, मोदी ही बनेंगे. And so that was a statement of his surrender. He himself said it in a chief ministerial press conference, and this is again a matter of record. He said 2019 में किसी और का चांस नहीं है, which he was right, but it was also his way of saying, boss, I am out of this race, nobody has a chance, let me do stick to power as best I can.
Okay. And you don't see him making another bid. I mean, it seems like, this seems like a common narrative across all other states as well, whether it be Mamata in Bengal, Kejriwal, is Kejriwal lynching, and, in other parts of the country as
Look,
well.
I've come from too many years of reporting these politicians to start saying yes or no.
Right.
Who knows? I mean, who knows? I mean, it's a changeable game. I mean, never say never. And, who am I to make a promise on part of Nitish or to say that, no, I have judged him, analyzed him. I can only judge him by his actions and what he says.
Okay.
After the UP elections, he did say कि किसी का chance नहीं है 19 में.
Great.
Nitish is also a great, as you know, and we've spoken about this, he's also a great pole vaulter.
Right.
And the vaults he can make are stunning. Completely stunning. So someone who has vaulted in his career from the CPI-ML to the Sangh Parivar, you can imagine how talented that person is at the game.
And craft some incredible narratives around it while making those vaults.
Oh, of course.
So, Sankarshan, talking of Nitish and his pole vaults that you were speaking of, over the years, you have witnessed him. I recall you, while speaking to you a few days ago over the phone, you mentioned that, he's a very slippery character to get hold of. I was just wondering, for our benefit and those of us who have tuned in, do you think you could share some stories and anecdotes? You've painted quite a few stories and anecdotes in your book. Some memorable ones that come to your mind that will give us a sense of what kind of a character is this man? What stands out to your mind?
Tough to say. He's not an easy man to define, and I think the one word that I would use for him, and I have used it in the book somewhere describing his nature, he's implacable. He's capable of being implacable to degrees where it can actually become unsettling. He can cut you cold when he thinks he has no use for you.
Oh.
He has done that to folks all down his career, beginning with George Fernandez and with Lalu Yadav, with a whole lot of his close associates. People call him a bad judge of character because he keeps bringing in people, then throwing them out, then bringing them back in and rewarding them. But I don't think he is that bad a judge of character. I think he uses people according to their use to him at that given time. And so it is that you will see that a lot of people have become persona non grata in Nitish's Darbar, and then suddenly they are back.
Right.
And so this happens very often with him.
Right.
He can also be arcane about what's really happening in his head. I think Lalu Yadav once, in a typical Bihari sort of colloquial outburst, he said, "Iske पेट में दांत है." पेट में दांत है का मतलब होता है where you cannot go to the depths of his thinking. He is too wily and too intangible, or can be, in terms of guessing out कि नीतीश करेगा क्या, इसके दिमाग में क्या चल रहा है. He can be listening to you very, very patiently, but sometimes you get the impression he's looking at you and saying, "What a fool you are. I have better things to do, or I have better plans." And he'll be agreeing to you. He's agreeing, ha, ha. Sometimes he'll give you an expression where he says, "Oh, you're talking all this, but you're a fool. I have better plans. I have other plans up my sleeve." And he has often sprung these surprises on people unbeknownst. And so in terms of, I think it served him politically as well to be that sort of character where you keep even the closest associate guessing about what your next move is. Look at what he did with Prashant Kishore, for instance. Brought him in, won an election, wooed him back from the Congress party, made him uh, vice president of the Janata Dal United, gave out comments that he is my Uttaradhikari, almost like he is my successor, jo karna hai, yahi karenge aage. And then completely went back on it to a degree that Prashant Kishore became persona non grata in his own party, and then he had to leave it. So
Right.
you can be very close to him, and the next day you can be a person who just didn't matter. I mean, it would seem as if he was never part of your life, or you were never part of his.
One of the impression that I carried after reading the book and the portrait that you painted was the character of a man who has trouble making up his mind. As a man
Indecisive person.
As an indecisive person.
Yeah, but you know
what you are, what I hear you speak is someone, and what you articulated a little while ago as well, is someone who uses this, this as a strategy. Who tactically retreats, who uses this. Is this indecisiveness strategic? Is that what you are trying to say?
That's exactly what I've written in my book. I mean, his lapses into reclusion,
right.
actual physical reclusion,
right.
his indecisiveness,
right.
his sort of lack of courage, I would say, to take a decisive step. I mean, all of these are I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes they might come from natural impulses. But I think over a period of time, he has learned to use his indecisiveness or his sort of tendency to mull over something over a period of time, to use it in ways that eventually benefit him. And he is an extremely smart guy. I mean, that I have no doubt. Sometimes over smart, sometimes I say of him, I mean, you can fool some people some of the time, but you can't fool everybody all of the time. And I think his credibility across the board is political credibility is quite low. I mean, it's quite low.
Quite low. Is that what you said? Did I hear you right?
Yes. His credibility as an ally is quite low. Among the Mahagathbandhan partners, for good reason, in the BJP for good reason. I mean, they may not spell it out.
Right.
But nobody in the BJP leadership is lost on what Nitish can spring on them. I mean, they don't treat him as a reliable ally or anything. It's a marriage of convenience. But in terms of Nitish's reliability, the quotient is very, very low, abysmally low. Because that is what his career has told people across the political spectrum, is that this.
Wouldn't that be, if I were to interrupt you for a moment, but wouldn't that be true for pretty much anyone who is good at, whose political longevity lasts, who's had an enduring career in politics, why would they be a good political ally? I mean,
well, Nitish is not a good political ally. He is not a good political ally. I don't believe he's a good political ally. I don't think he's a good ally.
Okay.
Nitish is only as good as he is to his own purposes.
Okay.
Which is fair. I mean, I'm not saying, he's not here for charity.
Sure.
And it's fair.
If you were to contrast that,
No, but listen, Lalu Yadav, for instance, he has been in the deep ditch since 2005. He's in jail. Right. But I mean, to give him his due, he has not jumped across to the BJP and made an alliance with them. I mean, there are differences. Nitish has slept with everybody.
Oh, how interesting. Okay.
I mean, Lalu has not even been. I mean, he's not even ready to sniff at the BJP, no matter how dire his circumstances. Nitish was ready to embrace the BJP when he didn't even need to. He had a government, he had a majority. It was a stable majority. And so there are differences. And so on account of his behavior, his demonstrable behavior, I don't think he's a reliable ally. And I'll tell you something very interesting about this man.
Uh-huh.
Nitish Kumar has never won Bihar singly.
Oh, okay.
He has always won in an alliance as a partner. Nitish Kumar's JDU has never been in power in Bihar. It has either been the NDA or it has been, for the shortest time, the Mahagathbandhan. He never, I think the moment was 2010. He could have picked up the courage and said, I don't want allies. I have done good work from 2005 till this point, and I'm going to ask the Bihar Janta to vote for me and my work. He did not have that. You know, his popularity in 2010, I still, it gives me goosebumps. He had done little work, but as I said, that little work stood so much in contrast. It gave Bihar hope that things can improve. बिजली आ सकती है, सड़कें बन सकते हैं, स्कूल में पुताई हो सकती है, बच्चे आ सकते हैं, हॉस्पिटल में, प्राइमरी हेल्थ सेंटर में दवा आ सकती है, महिलाओं को सुरक्षा मिल सकती है, क्राइम कम हो सकता है. All of that happened during that time. And so, I mean, that was one opportunity where Nitish could have, struck out on his own and got power. He missed that chance. And he will never be able to rule Bihar on his own. As it is, strictly in terms of, and he gets very irritated when I say this, in terms of his base, his caste base, is barely 6-7%. Lalu Yadav, even in the dumps, has always had consistently 17 to 20 to even more percentage of the vote. The BJP has much more in terms of a vote base. In fact, the BJP over the years has eroded his Ati Pichhada vote base, the extremely backward vote base.
Sankarshan, I must come in there. To those of us who are outside Bihar. In fact, it was only while going over your book, that I could kind of picture what is the caste landscape in Bihar like. It is fairly complex to someone who has not studied it or looked at it very closely. Do you think you could help us just understand what is it like? Just if you could paint a picture.
Have no worries, because it is as complex to me. But I'll try it. I'll take a shot at it. I'll try to explain this.
Yeah. And if you could just, since you mentioned that he has no caste base, given this complexity, how has Nitish?
He has a caste base. I didn't say he doesn't have a caste base. His caste base is very limited.
It's very limited.
But there is a rider, and again, this is something I say as a Bihari and as a journalist. I will explain this to you, but with a rider, is that whenever a Bihari discusses caste politics on a public platform, that Bihari will get lampooned as casteist. As if castes don't exist elsewhere. But now let me come to Bihar. Bihar, broadly speaking, and these numbers keep shifting. So broadly speaking, about 15 to 16% minorities. Barely out of the double digits, barely out. And this is where Bihar is different from UP. UP has a much higher percentage of upper castes. Bihar does not, 12-13% upper castes. That makes it how much? Nearly 30%. And then the 70% is divided between STs. After the division of Bihar became really minimal in Bihar, in what is now Bihar, because most of the tribal populations went to Jharkhand. You do have a section of Tharus in the Betia Champaran region, but they're fringe, minimal. but mostly scheduled castes and backwards. Now, backwards is that rainbow is where the khela happens.
I'm sorry, the
Khela, the game.
game. Okay. Khela. Okay. Huh.
The backwards, I mean, Yadavs by far the most dominant in terms of numbers, in terms of influence, um, in terms of economic power, in terms of their share on contracts and other things. Contracts, very important. ठेकेदार, very important in Bihar. ठेकेदार है, मतलब government contractor. So you are almost getting government money free because work never gets done or shoddy work gets done. Anyway, Yadavs. Then there are Kurmis and Koiris, which are agricultural castes, vegetable growers, cash croppers. Kurmis is where Mr. Nitish Kumar has his base. Love Kush, in mythical terms, they are called Love Kush because they're cousins, siblings, and they trace their roots from Love and Kush. And so Kurmis, Koiris are like twins, but 6 to 7%, not significant, but they have this ability to combine. And there are the other Ati Pichhada castes, which is a creation of the post-Mandal era, which is extremely, this you'll find only in Bihar, probably. EBCs, they are called. Whole range of castes from, Nonias. Nonia is people who dig salt out of the ground. A huge variety of vegetable growers and sellers. In Bihar, even the Musalmans, the Muslims are divided into upper and backward. So you have Sheikh Sayyid Pathan. They're the Brahmins, upper caste among Muslims. And you have the Pasmanda Muslims. Okay. Pasmanda Muslims are the backward Muslims. वो चूड़ी वाला और फल बेचने वाला और रुई का काम करने वाला, धुनिया जो होता है, people who work with quilts, etc. And so all these castes, in fact, if I don't know if you've seen it, the whole range of EBCs is mentioned in one part of my book. It's a really rainbow cast of characters. And so I still believe that if you have the better part of the backward and the EBC, you are able to combine with the upper caste vote or the SC vote and come to power. You need a combination. And Nitish Kumar has never been able to come without a combination. So when he actually won an election 2005, he was able to combine his vote base with the upper caste vote base of the Bharatiya Janata Party.
Okay.
And some backward groups,
right?
Non-Yadav backward groups, because you see what happens. The relationship between the Yadavs and the other backward communities is very, it's attritional, because the Yadavs want to dominate everything,
right?
And so the lesser backwards feel, a bit, repressed, apprehensive, annoyed, sort of. They're willing to go to anyone who will take them out of the Yadav's clutches, which is why you have these people drifting out. Forget Yadav. They are the oppressor caste among the backwards, and they're very dabang. They're strong caste. So this is broadly what it is.
Right.
And so in 2015, let me finish this. 2015, Nitish was able to flip that, and he combined with Lalu's Yadav plus Muslim vote and was able to come to power.
Right.
Why is he comes to power? Because he has this. Just remember, I'll take you back to 2005. His persona, his behavior, his countenance, the way he speaks in public, the way he conducts himself marks a stark contrast to Lalu. It is not charismatic,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives a lot of people a sense of comfort. Illuchalla fangani,
Mm.
you know. And so that persona he's built, and of course by 2010 he had built himself a governance record,
Right.
which is why I say he could have struck out on his own, but he didn't have the political courage to do it. And I keep actually going back to what VP Singh did in 1989, when Rajiv Gandhi and the Congress party had 400 plus seats in the Lok Sabha, and he had the courage of his convictions, walked out of the Congress party and was able to bring Rajiv down for whatever short period. But he had the courage of his convictions.
Right.
And to walk out of a 400 plus Congress at that time took a lot of courage.
Right.
And so you have to give VP Singh that. And that kind of courage Nitish has never had. Never. At least if he has it, then we have no evidence that he's employed it. And so he combines himself, his persona with someone else's votes.
Okay.
I will readily agree that beyond these two people, Bihar mein neta nahi hai, some statewide. And this is partly the misfortune of Bihar, that it has been swinging between Lalu Yadav, Nitish Kumar. There is no third. Still, there is no third alternative face, which is recognizable and even across the state in terms of having a mass base beyond their caste base, and through either personality or through work or through just being known in the public sphere. So there is no third. And so Nitish is always in contention as chief minister, because Nitish Babu.
So when you.
But if he is reduced to himself, if he is not partnering, not allying with someone, I would really like to see how many votes he gets or seats. In 2010 he could have, but not now. I see two very interesting trends. Nitish's graph as a person, administrator, chief minister is going down.
Going down, okay.
Yes. The RJD-led Mahagathbandhan, RJD Congress, the entire graph of the opposition is going down. The graph that is sustaining itself at a higher level, consistent, is that of not even the Bharatiya Janata Party. It is the graph of Narendra Modi.
Okay.
Now this may change. I'm not saying that. This is the trend now.
Okay.
Is that the one sustained graph that is not going down, despite all this COVID, mismanagement of the economy, the migrant crisis, all of this. There is some sort of Teflon coating to Narendra Modi's image, which is clearly reflected. The faith in Modi ji, no one else, jo bhi hai, zinda hai to, because of, that is consistent. And that leads me to believe is that the main opposition party in Bihar at the moment is the Bharatiya Janata Party.
Okay.
It is in power alliance.
Right.
But I mean it when I say that it is the main opposition party in Bihar. And the results of this election will bear some of this out. Because in terms of seeking a share of power, not just a share of power, the degree of power, the Bharatiya Janata Party is way above everyone in the field. And the Bharatiya Janata Party led by Narendra Modi, not any of these local, although they have good local leaders, some of them, Modi, etc., they're long-term leaders. But it is not on account of them. It is on account of Narendra Modi that BJP still has this graph high, not falling, not falling, just
not falling. Okay,
going like this, and way above this one. So it's traveling like this, and these two are traveling like this.
Okay,
I can say this much from what I've seen, not more. I will not be able to really reveal where I've seen it, but it is. it is with serious people who have done this, who are doing this study, and it's not easy for me to just ignore that. And a lot of it matches the feedback you get as a journalist from the ground, talking to people.
So how do you see this unspool itself? I mean, this is very
I
interesting.
don't know. I don't know. I know it's a very unpopular answer, but I believe it is something that I have always said. I do not know. It is difficult for me to say it. If I was giving you an answer, I'd be either fooling you or lying. The chemistry of the Bihar election is yet to sort of be crafted. One doesn't know when Modi drops shop, his graph goes higher or lower. But the general trends that you understand as an observer is that Nitish does not have the shine that he had 5 years ago. He's seen as a man too embroiled in trying to just somehow hold on to his kursi. The other reason I say I do not know is that we have not seen any settled negotiation among the two rival alliances on seats. Neither the BJP, Ramvilas Paswan, Nitish formation, which is the ruling formation, they have not come to a settlement. Neither has the RJD, Congress, and other combined.
Right.
And so we'll have to wait and see. The fact that the BJP, Nitish, LJP combined, which is a ruling combined, has been in power for nearly 3 years now, 3.5 years, is going into the election with Nitish as the chief ministerial face so far.
So far. That's a caveat. Yes, that's a caveat. So far.
In politics, always be careful. I mean, don't try and predict politicians. That's something, one fundamental thing I've learned. There is a caveat. I mean, a ruling settled alliance should by now have already declared who's fighting how many number of seats. The fact that they haven't, the fact that Ramvilas's party, his son Chirag Paswan, who's now the anointed successor, is attacking Nitish every day. Yes, he is. He is attacking Nitish's policy, governance, this every day, and that attack is a build-up to demand for more seats.
Right.
And he's probably been put up to the job by the Bharatiya Janata Party. You attack him, and we will not say anything. And so there is a pie fight going on even in the ruling alliance, which is why the seat adjustments have not been made public yet. And so let us see. There's a lot of X factors that are to reveal themselves before we can even sit down and have a meaningful discussion on where this might head.
Fascinating. And where does Lalu's son factor in this?
Well, he is he sits on the largest vote chunk after the Bharatiya Janata Party, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to sort of make that vote bank an effective enough instrument for significant victories. He does not have. He is a pale shadow of his father. He doesn't have his energies, doesn't have his discipline, doesn't have the connect with the masses. He is not rooted. Lalu Yadav came from the ground, self-made, completely. These guys are brats. I mean they've grown up in a well-provided household. Chief Minister ke bete beti. So their ability to hit the road and make a sustained fight, loin-girded fight, jisko bolte hain. They don't have that ability. I've traveled with both father and son and daughter, and I've seen their energy levels, their connect, their chemistry with the people, completely different.
Right.
And if Lalu Yadav is not allowed to hit the campaign trail, which most likely he won't be,
right,
then it's going to be a huge factor, because he can bring you votes. I mean, idle votes. He can motivate people into voting. Otherwise, and I don't think that the Muslim Yadav combination, one, the moment Muslims and Yadav combine, they create a counter consolidation on the other side. Two,
Right.
the Yadavs have since 2014 shown a clear tendency to break away and vote for the BJP, especially where there is a Muslim candidate fielded by the RJD Congress combined. So that level of communal fracture exists.
Right.
And so to say that Yadavs will be so loyal to Lalu that they will all to the RJD, that, and Lalu is not a factor. They're not voting Lalu because Lalu is not going to become chief minister. So that is the other motivational factor. Ki ye Lalu ji to hai nahi Maidan mein, who should we vote for?
Right.
And also there is a section of Yadav that has got empowered since 1990 who wants a stake in power. So I will not blame that section of Yadavs who have become contractors, who've got stake, who've got real estate agents, builders. I will not blame them if they put their eggs in another basket, which is going to be the ruling basket. So all of these things are going to happen.
If I were to attempt to summarize what I hear from you, Sankarshan, I hear the narrative of a man who's trying to hold on to power. And to do that, Sam Dam Dandabhed, as we say, it's all okay. He's an amoral man, and that's fine. But that is the nature of politics.
I'm not saying it's fine with me. I'm saying
I'm not suggesting it's fine with you, but that's the nature of politics.
I can't control it either. I mean,
you can't control that narrative either.
I have no place to. I can write about it and analyze it, but I'm not going to sit in try and change that, because that life is for him to lead, or
that life,
for others to lead, and that life is for people to attest or not attest.
Right.
At various given times. I mean, I cannot. You see, this is a mistake that sometimes error of parallax happens in your mind,
right.
And I am not the repository of, or cannot be. I mean, it'll be completely outrageously audacious to become the repository of public sentiment. I'm not.
Right.
I'm just a journalist. I'm a reporter.
Right.
I'm passing by.
And here's a man who also knows when to pull back and hold his horses. And for reasons best known to him, when he had a chance, he dropped the ball on his ambition. His graph has dropped. His biggest opposition is the party that whom he has aligned with. And how he faces that battle, how he engages. That battle could very well decide his future.
That's the most engrossing thing in this election, according to me.
Most fascinating.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you so much, Sankarshan.